Welcome to the Ignite podcast. I'm your host, Brian Bell. Today, I'm joined by Atul Raghunathan, the CTO for Hyperbound, a really exciting Team Ignite portfolio company. A little commercial for Team Ignite. So would love to get an intro for you for the audience and then take it from there.
Of course, yeah. I'm Atul Raghunathan. I'm the current CTO at Hyperbound, right? We're a recent Y Combinator company. And before Hyperbound, I was working at Meta Ads and on Instagram's algorithm, so lots of cool stories from there. And I was getting my master's in machine learning from Carnegie Mellon.
Wow, super impressive background. But so walk me through kind of how you came up with the idea for Hyperbound and what's that kind of origin story?
Oh yeah, the origin story of Hyperbound is great. So we were working on a different product in the sales space. So we're working on like a post-sales product that would still develop the same type of customer intelligence for upsells. And my co-founder and I were trying to sell the product that we had just built. So what happened then was that we were sending out like hundreds of personalized LinkedIn Connect messages and emails between ourselves. Um, I think one week we even hit like 1,000 a piece. So at a certain point, I was like, I want to get back to like, working on the product. I just spent all day and all night just like writing, drafting, and sending these sales emails. I just can't do this anymore. So I told my co-founder, like, hey, you stick with what you're doing. I just like I cannot continue like this. So I'm gonna like figure out a
Can't
way
live
to
like
automate
this.
this. Exactly. I'm an engineer, my
Yeah,
brain
yeah.
doesn't work like
That's so
so
funny. Because I've
the
done a
repetitive
little bit of
task.
everything in my career, and I've done a lot of sales, and a lot of venture capital is basically sales. And I remember just writing those personalized emails one after the other, and even doing cold calls, right? And
Oh yeah.
the hardest part about sales is just finding the person that has like the BANT, the
Hmm.
budget, authority, need, and timing, right? And
Exactly.
but talk me through more. Yeah.
Yeah. So we decided to have a little competition, you know. So my co-founder Shiharsha was going to continue sending out like hand personalized like messages to everyone. And I was going to see if there was a way that I could automate this and get like a volume play together. So I built a bot. It only took me around 3 hours for the first draft of this. So I built like a LinkedIn bot that would go through, like read people's LinkedIn profiles, right? Use GPT and use some like custom code that I had like put together to write them a personalized email to see if they were, free to meet for either a user interview, depending on who they were, or free to meet for like a customer call. Um, and it was working like really well. Like the outputs of this were like basically as good as what I could do in the 1 minute that I would spend like writing down like furiously a really short LinkedIn Connect message. So I got greedy with using it, right? Like it was working really well. I was getting some responses. So I was like, okay, like 10 messages
Like
an hour. Like let me just
what
like
was the kind of the increase in response rate that you're like, when you would go personalize it, 100 a day, what was your response rate? And then now you're using some sort of AI tool to personalize. Like, was it the same response rate? Was there a lift?
Yeah. So the response rate went up because the AI was able to notice like more features about the person than I was in like my cursory glance, right? Because I was only spending a couple seconds on each one because I had so many more to get to. The AI was actually able to like read more interesting things and like drop them in the connect message. I was like, oh, I didn't even notice that. And then I like looked down and there it is in their experience. So that was cool. But what happened at the end of the week, right? Is I got banned from LinkedIn because I was sending too many of these messages.
As one does,
But
yeah.
exactly. But when I got unbanned from LinkedIn, I had like 60 messages waiting for me of people that responded to my reach outs, and my co-founder had five.
Ooh,
Uh, exactly.
60
So
out of how many?
let's see. I think I reached out to like a little over 2,000 people that week.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're talking, close to something like 3% response rate, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a great response rate by any means, but that's more to do with the quality of our prospecting than it was because like my co-founder was getting an even lower response rate with the messages that he was hand personalizing. So that also taught us the importance of pre-qualification, good prospecting, all that. Uh, yeah, it was that's the origin story.
Nice. Well, tell me more about the process, because you came through Y Combinator, which is the world famous accelerator. Tell me more about the process where you guys decided you had this idea, and you were prospecting for Hyperbound before you got into YC, or was this a different company?
This is a different company. So at the core, right, we both knew that we wanted to apply some of the fundamentals of the ad technology world into sales tech, right? We wanted to figure out like ways that we could develop the same type of intelligence that like the Instagram ad algorithm has, for example, um, and apply that into like targeting sales material better. We figured that the post-sales side would be easier because a lot of sales nowadays, especially in B2B, like the majority of revenue for some companies really comes from upsells,
Mm.
not like net new sales.
Yeah, you kind of
So
land
we
and
were
expand.
focusing
Yeah.
exactly. It's a really common strategy nowadays, right? So we were focusing on that end of things originally, but when we built this product, like that LinkedIn bot for ourselves, right? And we were just like, you know, talking to other YC founders at one of our like batch retreat events. We were just like casually mentioning this, and they're like, "I'll pay you for this right now." And we're like, okay, wait, maybe, maybe it's worth considering
So wait, so
just
you guys got so
making
you
this
had
a
an
product.
idea, you got into the program with a different idea?
Yes. This is the fun part about YC, right?
Yeah.
They they pick founders, not an idea,
Yeah.
unless your idea is like. So what they actually care about in an interview. This is a great tip for listeners who plan on
Yeah.
applying to Y
Yeah.
Combinator, right? What they care about is the way that you vet your ideas, not the actual idea itself, right?
Mm.
So they'll
They
ask
want you
you.
to, so walk me through your thinking. How are you thinking about this idea? How did you decide on it? Things like that.
Exactly, right. Not only just how you decided on it, like who did you talk to, right? What customers are you talking to? How many
Mm.
customer interviews did you do? Like, what was your most interesting insights from the customer interviews, right? And then what happens is that a lot of people think of a really cool solution of a problem that they personally face, and then they end up just going, sitting in a silo, building it, and finding out that no one wants to buy it, or that there's no commercial use case for it. And a lot of those products make great open source products. They make like great uh, non-venture scale businesses.
Yeah.
But when you're building a venture scale business, you need to be like in lockstep with your customer, and that's what YC cares about.
Yeah.
So when we applied to YC, we were applying with a customer service idea originally. So this was like almost like 12 idea iterations ago, like even way before the customer success product, right? We were like, it was like a customer support thing. It was to help with phone calls. Like analytics from phone calls and also making the phone call experience a little bit better by like targeting some of the content in the phone call.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we pivoted so much those first couple of weeks, and YC was just so supportive. Like I don't think we would have landed on such a like an idea that was so like pleasurable to sell as this one, if it wasn't for the YC events where we got to speak with the group partners, where we got to speak
Mm.
with other founders in the space. Like this is one of those things. It's like a network effect
Yeah.
type stumbling, and we're very very grateful for it.
Yeah. What I love about Martech, and I spent years both running demand gen teams and lifecycle marketing, email marketing. I did email marketing at an email marketing company, vertical response back in the day. And what I love about Martech is that you use the thing to sell the thing. And so you dog food, and there's this like virtuous cycle that happens where you're literally you're eating high on your own supply, right? You're basically using your software to sell more of your software. And then when you reach out to
Mhm.
people, you're like, yeah, I use my software to find you and sell to you. And don't you want to do the same? So it's kind of it just reinforces, because at the end of the day, we're just building stuff and selling stuff to each other.
Mhm.
That's what companies do. And so you got to be good at one of those things. Everything else is kind of a cost. But yeah, talk me through the talk us through the business, how it's going. Like, what's the where you're getting traction, and like, who your ideal customer is. Anybody listening that runs a B2B SaaS software company trying to acquire customers, what they should know about you.
Yeah, so let me tell our listeners a little bit about the product, and then I'll get into like who it's for exactly. But yeah, Hyperbound was essentially created from our vision about what the next generation of email marketing should look like. So currently, with high volume sales and marketing emails, we're using templates to reach out to a group of people, right? They might be segmented templates, but at the end of the day, they're templates. And coming up with a template that gets people to convert is really hard because
Mm.
each buyer has like very different preferences. What someone thinks is the best sales email ever is someone's like idea of a nightmare. Like, why did you send this horrible sales email to me? So there's actually a lot of information in the buyer's current experience and the background, and we can kind of predict how they're going to react. Um, so it's that type of intelligence that we really wanted to bring into this space so we can inform the ideal strategy on how to reach out, right? So with that in mind, right, like our ideal customer are B2B SaaS companies, typically those with over 50 employees, and with those who already have an outbound pipeline, right? Those who are already sending outbound emails and are looking to optimize it, to try to double their response rates, to like figure out, why their current outbound strategy
Yeah,
isn't
and
working.
what is the typical lift? So you go into a company, you run a pilot, um, and they've been doing this already, right? So what's the
Mhm.
pitch to them to use your software? Is it better response rates? It saves your SDR's time, all the above. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's better response rates at the end of the day is like what gets people in the door. But what we found, right, is all we got to do is show them examples of emails that we've generated, and it's like it's like a magic moment almost, right? Because you can see that these emails that we generated are clearly not templated, right? Like it's as if someone spent like 5 minutes like digging through this
Studying the
person's background.
profile,
Yeah.
studying the business, thinking about, okay, I'm trying to sell X to this business. How should I position this email? Like it's the kind of stuff that I did as a salesperson in my 20s, where I
Hmm.
started, where I'd be reaching out. I worked in commercial real estate, and I would be thinking about like, okay, I'm trying to lease this retail space, and I'm reaching out to this restaurant. Why would they want to lease this space? And I have to sit there and
Hmm.
think about it for 5 or 10 minutes before I reach out to them.
Exactly. Like personalization works. It's like such a well studied thing in the marketing space and the sales space. The issue, like you said, is you really need to sit there and spend time thinking about it, right? Um, and that's essentially like what we attempted to solve, right? So it's getting to getting to the point of personalized communication, but without the time saving. So we've got two types of customers, right? Ones who already personalize their communication, and those who are currently sending templated emails. For one, the KPI that moves is response rate, and for the other, the KPI that moves is like cost, right? Because now they need to spend less time personalizing versus if you weren't personalizing at all, you're
Right.
now like moving into better quality communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the typical at the end of the pilot? They're seeing an increase in leads and response rates. Walk me through kind of what the typical outcome is.
Yeah. No, I mean, we're expecting our first results back from like one of our customers essentially at the end of next week. So really looking forward to that. That customer, by the way, was so enamored with the tech that they actually invested in us. One of our favorite investors. Like that's the type of stuff that makes us like feel very happy about
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Well, that's when
But
you know
yeah.
you got something. I remember as a PM doing customer interviews and being out there, and you're doing customer discovery and you're just interviewing your persona, your target market, and then you'd be like, okay, here's what we're working on, and you kind of walk them through the clickable prototype or whatever, and you knew you had something, and it wasn't the first time out. This is like 30th, 40th, 50th time out. Like you said, you probably pivoted a dozen times in YC. Um, it was kind of like you're kind of like weeks, if not months, into this, try to figure out what this persona wants, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, yeah, I need this. Can I buy it today? Is this available? And that was kind of like the little story you had about your Y Combinator group, fellow cohort members saying, hey, can I buy this? I'll pay you for this right now. And that's when you got
Exactly.
something.
No, it's a
That's like
wonderful
the aha
feeling.
moment. Yeah.
Like it's like the first taste of YC's motto, right? Is make something people want, right? And
Love that.
it's addicting if you approach it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm in love with their whole philosophy around this. So
Yeah, and that's what's so great about technology generally, right? Is we're basically building things to solve human problems for a
mhm,
profit, right? And
exactly.
it's really fulfilling, actually, to solve someone's problem, whatever it is, right? And in this case, I
Yeah,
mean, sales is a slog. It's a slog, and it's painful, right? Because you're getting punched in the face over and over again, and you're getting rejected, and it's hard. And comes a platform like Hyperbound. It's like, hey, I can alleviate some of that burden for you and get you in front of the right people with the right message, like magic, right? And it's just like
so
magic, right?
when we talk to salespeople, right, their favorite part of the job is building relationships, right? It's like
Yeah,
taking like it's building relationships with people. It's like talking to them, like getting to know them, understanding like who they are, what they want, and like salespeople are people, right? Like they enjoy that type of thing, and the part that they hate is this first cold outreach step.
yeah,
This does not feel human. It does not need to be human, right? We want to let salespeople enjoy their job and get rid of like the tedium. Like this is the tedium that lets them focus on people who've responded. Because people who've responded are interested. They're interested in building a relationship with you. Like that's where you as a salesperson can shine. So we're excited that we're enabling them to do that.
yeah. It's so cool. And then yeah, so you pivot in the program. You have a successful round coming out of the program. Now you're kind of now hitting some traction. Walk me through like I would love to like kind of shift gears and talk about the future of marketing, right? What's interesting, I've been around this marketing stuff and sales stuff for 15, 20 years now. Built a lot of MarTech, ad tech, lots of AI powered stuff in the first gen. I was at Rocket Fuel back in the day, as you know.
Mm.
And you've spoken at some of these AI for marketers events and stuff like that. What do you think is the future of marketing? Is it, you know, just a bunch of AIs talking to other AIs, setting up meetings for humans? Like, what's the end game here?
Yeah, no. At a certain point, right? Like I think most of the functionality in business that is time consuming or tedious will get automated away. And I think like B2B marketing is about to go through some massive changes, right?
Yeah,
At least now when you still have humans on the other side of the inbox, right? If you've ever experienced like the magic of YouTube knowing exactly what to recommend to you or TikTok
yeah,
trapping you on their app for hours,
yeah.
I think that's going to come to
Can't look
marketing.
away. I watched this one
Yeah.
recently where it was a bunch of cars running into a brick wall at 50 miles an hour and how
Hmm.
they collapse. And it's just like, I can't look away. I just have to keep watching these cars run into this brick wall. Uh, and the Ford Bronco completely just a little boxy Bronco you would have died in that Bronco. There was just no way you would be alive. The thing just completely collapsed like a tin can, like you
Oh
stomped on
man.
a Pepsi can or something. Oh man.
I remember when Vine came out, right? It's like you would have never thought that like 7-second videos could just like grab someone and keep their attention
Oh,
for
remember all
so
the
long.
Vine mashups on YouTube? I'd lose like me and my family would lose like an hour watching all the Vine mashups from like 5, 10 years ago.
Exactly.
It was
Like
like the first TikTok.
it's like they've cracked something in the human psyche. Uh, it's a little addicting, right? It's just
Yeah.
they know exactly what type of thing you want to see, and they give it to you. And I think like that's like the power of machine learning and also kind of the danger of machine learning. There's a lot of ethical dubiousness here. But I think that's where marketing is headed, for better or for worse.
Yeah. So
So
like I'm thinking about this, right? Because if companies like Hyperbound can make this at scale, hyper personalized customer discovery reach out work at scale, what's going to happen is there's going to have to be a equal AI automated response on the other end, right? Like if I'm getting these hyper personalized reach outs through email and through LinkedIn and through whatever,
mhm.
I might start having so many I can't even reply to them all, right? And
Yeah.
so then you have to like use another AI to say, okay, here are my needs right now, like, and here's what talk to this AI, answer these emails.
No, seriously,
Yeah,
I think that's gonna happen. Like AI is gonna like the way that we do business via email is kind of antiquated. All right. It is a strange platform that holds basically all of the value in B2B. And I think the inbox, as it appears, is going to change a lot.
Yeah.
Because
Well, especially with
even
AI,
now,
like crawling my email
yeah,
and figuring out what do I actually need to pay attention to? You know, is this from a
exactly.
portfolio company or is this like an inbound from a random startup? I don't know, right? And if it is, have them answer these questions and then decide if I should meet them or not based on the criteria that matters to me. And that's how I think about it as a VC. But like as a business, you might say, oh, okay, you're selling your accounting software. I'm good. I'm happy with my accounting software. So I like, and my AI should know that over time and just like
Hmm.
decline those emails and archive them.
Exactly. No, building an email response bot is actually a lot easier than it is to build a outbound bot, like what we're doing essentially,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you're doing responses, all you have to do is categorize them into a certain number of buckets, decide which bucket it falls into, and then shoot off either canned or like a very programmatic response.
Right.
Because if someone's reaching out to you with a sales email, you don't necessarily need to respond as a human.
Right. I love this analogy that you have of everyone's had this experience, and not everyone, because not we feel like everyone uses YouTube, but some people out there that
Mm-hmm.
I've met in my family at family reunions or whatever, they're like, oh no, I never use YouTube. But you know, we felt that everybody's kind of felt that like, oh, this is perfect for me right now, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, email could be that, right? This discovery, you know, almost like this, yeah, the motion of trying to find the person and company that needs your thing right now. And
Mm-hmm.
this like perfectly timed email comes in. Hey, I know you're struggling with this, and I have the perfect product for you, you know.
Exactly. Like imagine knowing like which of your users, based off of all of the data from every previous interaction you've had with a customer. Imagine knowing like which of your prospects is going to be like the one that will sign your next deal.
Yeah.
That's the type of power that machine learning has. And it's just not effectively been tapped into. And I think here's where like the magic of generative AI comes into marketing, right? So with previous like iterations of marketing, you're always just targeting a pre-created pool of content. So like some human has written the copy with some intent, and that intent is not transparent to the targeting algorithm. The targeting algorithm then tries to assign it to someone and then figure out like whether it did well or not. Now with generative AI stepping in and actually creating the content, it knows the intent and it can establish causation. They can establish if this intent is there, then this result appears.
Mm.
And that's going to be insanely powerful. I get that that's not exactly in the most layman's terms, right? But it's essentially about going one level beyond just targeting content and understanding why a piece of targeted content will work for someone.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how did you end up in AI in the first place? You know, like
Oh,
you're obviously a very smart person. Um, Walk us through kind of how you got interested in AI in the first place and what's that
yeah,
origin story?
this is a great question. So I went to like I'd say in my first year of like university is where I really fell into this AI trap. So I previously was an electrical engineer focused student, right? So I had patented like one of my ideas around essentially like I built a hybrid light bulb. This is a crazy like tangent story,
Oh wow.
but you know how like LED light bulbs put off a lot of heat? Like you'd think they put off a lot less heat than incandescent bulbs, and they do. But they still get very, very hot. Like especially the big ones and like warehouses and stuff. They got huge heat sinks on the back. So I was thinking like, hey, that heat from this bulb existing in that space is actually like reducing the lifespan of the bulb because these electronics aren't meant to like stay this hot for this long.
All right.
So like, is there a way that we can just remove the heat from the system and convert it into electricity? So like, there's thermoelectric generators that exist. So like, I built technology that would take the heat from the bulb, turn it into electricity, and then through a really clever combination of like electronics, convert it back into electricity that the light bulb itself could use just for a
Wow.
second before switching back to mains power. So anyway, I was patenting that. That was the end of tangent. And it was such a pain. Like, it's so expensive to get a patent. It's so expensive to know whether or not, like, to do a patent search. And attorneys here, like, I got a love-hate relationship with attorneys in this space because they will charge you for a 40-hour patent search, even if they find the conflicting patent in, like, the first, like, 20 minutes, because,
Mm.
you know, that's what you paid for. So I was working at a research lab at CMU that specialized in doing this patent search through natural language processing, right? Because let's say that we are able to flag something for you right away. That's like properly understanding this like patent legalese and converting it into like numbers that the machine can understand to decide whether two patents conflict or not. So I was working on this lab. I was working on like some really cutting edge natural language processing tech with them, and it was like a series of magic moments for me. I was like, wow, like the I did not realize that technology for this had progressed so far in the past like 3 or 4 years. Like this is when like BERT had come out. This is when like the field was changing of natural language processing, which eventually culminated in large language models. Uh, so yeah, I think that's where I got my start, and I've just been hooked ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, a really interesting story to how serendipitous encounters throughout our life will guide us. You kind of look back and you can connect the dots, but sometimes it's hard looking forward to connect the dots. Speaking of looking forward, like
Uh-huh.
you're involved in AI, you're seeing the impacts. Like, what do you think like the next 5 years looks like? We've had some pretty interesting online encounters, and I've written some articles on this that you've commented on. One trend I was looking at that I'd love to get your thoughts on, or kind of the complexities of these generative AI models, right? I think one thing I was looking at is they're increasing in complexity about 10x, like order of magnitude.
Hmm.
Um, that means basically the parameters of the model, the interconnectivity of the model, and things like that. Do you feel like this continues, and we just get bigger and bigger models, or have we hit like a wall of complexity and it makes sense to sort of get more verticalized?
Yeah. No, like this is a very interesting question, right? I think that every time you resort to improving the performance of a ML model by just ranking up, like, just like notching up the complexity, just going, like, give it more, compute, just more data, like it'll get there. Like that's how you've hit the dead end in that approach for, something like artificial general intelligence. But this comes with a caveat, right? Like the model will continue to get better just at like an exponentially worse rate. So like as you exponentially increase the amount of parameters, like you might still see like a linear or just sublinear improvement in performance. And I think that's exactly what autoregressive LLMs are going through at the moment. Right. So the complexity is increasing exponentially. Like I think I forget what the like exact numbers are. Maybe you remember this, but like GPT-4 is like orders of magnitude larger than GPT-3. It's not just like slightly
Yeah, it
more.
was like 100x
Uh,
or something. Yeah,
exactly, exactly. So it's like obviously that's got to stop somewhere. Like they're already running out of GPUs
right. At
to
some point, the
to host
inference just
GPT-4.
the inference call takes 5 minutes to process, and it's you know it's just
Yeah,
too long.
I don't know. I don't know how quantum computers work. Maybe that's the answer, but uh,
Well, it
yeah, like
appears
I think
the
yeah.
brain has some quantum. It takes advantage of some quantum effects. Have you heard this?
Oh, no, I haven't heard this. This is
Yeah,
actually
I
quite
didn't. I
interesting.
don't know much about it, but I kind of heard it in some video or podcast I watched, um,
Oh,
which kind of makes sense, right? It's like the
yeah.
emergent properties of intelligence from this biological substrate of what is it, 100 billion neurons in our brain, something like that. Anyway,
Hmm.
um, I mean, if anything is going to happen, we'll keep doubling the performance of these. models and the capabilities. What do you think the next 5 years holds? Are we all just going to have AI assistants doing most of the work for us, or?
I think AI is going to be essentially over the next 5 years, right? It's going to be a co-pilot for most of your duties, and it gets just better and better and better over time. I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of like tedious tasks that human creativity is not like, well, we're essentially taking someone who's capable of a lot and putting them through something that, a robot could do, right? And I think a lot of those like tasks will get automated away. And there's a lot of implications here, right? Like, is this going to create more employment opportunity in other fields? It likely will.
Mm-hmm.
But what are those other fields? Like, there's a lot of equity concerns here. Like, do you now need an education in AI before you can participate? Like, is this taking
Right.
away, yeah, so
Well,
there's so much here.
like you think back a couple hundred years ago, most of us were working on farms, right? And along come these machines, and like we're like, we can't even imagine what we would do if we weren't farming.
Yeah.
Like what do we do, right? And factories came along, and we're working factories, and then a lot of that stuff got automated, and we're like, what will we do? Like, now there's machines building everything.
Oh, yeah. I personally think the most interesting ethical consequences are going to come from the countries that are currently facing like population collapse problems. Like, uh, I think it's China, Japan, Korea, right, where the fertility rate is really low, where like the majority of population is going to be like elderly in around like 50 years or
Yeah.
so. I think they're going to be the first ones to really contend with the ethical consequences of AI,
Mm.
and I can only hope it goes well.
Yeah. Tell us more about the
Yeah,
ethical.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to ask Sam Altman about this actually when he came to Y Combinator to speak. And what he told me like really stuck with me. It's that like you can't actually solve ethics properly for like AI because everyone has such a different definition of ethics that it's like you're never going to make everyone happy. So you need to like default down to something. And what is that something? Right? Like, I personally think that there's a lot of work um, that can go into both the observability and explainability of these models to potentially help set some of these guardrails over time. But it's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you feel like we're heading towards a hard takeoff AI scenario or a slow takeoff?
definitely slow takeoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm, like I know people like saw LLMs and were like, "Wow, this is so much better than what we've had before," right?
Yeah.
Like
Well, it's because it got
the
10
world
x
is
better,
changing.
right? Like GPT 3.5 was 10x better than 3, and 4 is probably 10x better than 3.5. But
Exactly.
I think we're hitting the GPU wall, like you said, like the inference time. That's probably why they haven't released version 5 yet. Is it's probably taking 2 minutes to inference, and they're like, ugh, they have this model complexity barrier with the current hardware, right?
Like the same thing happened with reinforcement learning. The same thing happened with deep learning and neural networks. It's just like these architectures like ride a wave, and then they typically hit like uh, some type of wall,
Yeah.
and that's fine. It just means that we're onto the next architecture that's a combination of
It's kind
these
of like
two.
it's kind of like an S curve, right? Overlapping S
Yeah.
curves, like you hit this like wall, and this has been happening in technology for over 100 years, right? Look at vacuum tubes kind of hit a wall, and then it was transistors, and they kind of hit a wall, and then
Yep.
it just kind of, yeah, we keep finding new ways to expand our capabilities. Tell us about your semi-supervised learning experience, and maybe tell the audience what that is. I know what it is, but explain what
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
and why it's important, and kind of your experience in that.
This stuff is super interesting. I find it fascinating. But let's see, like, if I can, like, it took me like months to onboard into this space just because of like
Yeah.
how ridiculous the complexity is. So let me just like try to walk through maybe an example,
Yeah.
and hopefully that'll help illustrate what we're doing. So I was working on semi-supervised learning on meta ads, right? Uh, and what semi-supervised learning is at the highest level, just to give the tiniest bit of context, is say that you have a like gigantic pool of data, and for 20% of them, you know like what the labels are for that data. So you know that 20% of them I should classify as, apples, bananas, or oranges. The remaining 80%, you just have a picture of the fruit and you don't know like what the actual label is. So what you could do is do supervised learning on the 20% and just throw away the other 80% of the data. And that might work. Like you might get sufficient results for your use case. But Meta just has access to so much data that's unlabeled because of something called ATT. So Apple essentially placed recent restrictions on third-party cookies and tracking. So it's really hard for Meta ads to know whether like a ad that they put out converted the way that they wanted, right? Like
Yeah.
whether, someone, yeah, like clicked on it, bought the product, all those things. So let's say that you've served like 100 million ads in like the past couple hours, right? For 40% of those ads, you actually do have the tracking that tells you whether or not like the user bought the item. For the remaining 60%, you don't have anything. So you can, to train a model to predict whether a user is going to purchase a product after seeing the ad, you could just use the 40% of the data, but you'd rather use all of it in some way. So the semi-supervised learning that I was using would go one step beyond and predict, like build another model that would create fake labels for the data that was
Mm.
not like labeled, and then use all of that data to train a predictor. And you might just assume like, hey, like if I create fake labels from the data that like from a classifier that's trained on just the 40%, it can't be any more accurate than that original 40%. Um, and you'll be right, right? The actual training accuracy of the overall model will be lower than the training accuracy of the original model on just that 40% of the data. But the subtle nuance here is that the performance time, like the actual performance of this model in the real world of the semi-supervised model as opposed to the supervised model is going to be better because of something called like generalization. So the model has a better understanding of the data distributions of the real world because you literally gave it more data. You gave it the 100% instead of the
Right.
40%. So it generalizes to something better, even though the actual training time performance is worse. It's a little nuanced and like
Yeah.
very, very hard to like understand from the first
Yeah.
explanation of it. Like even I was quite confused
The
at
Ignite
first.
podcast just got really technical, folks. I want to go back. I want to circle back to the guardrails topic,
Yeah,
right? 'Cause I think that's really important too. What do you think those guardrails look like for AI? To keep it safe and equitable for society.
yeah. Okay, so this is a great question. There's two types of guardrailing that's possible. One is what typically like a layperson would think of as guardrails is you look at the output of the algorithm and then you decide whether or not this was an appropriate output, like whether it's like biased output, whether it's fair, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you like say yes or no, um, and maybe you improve the algorithm over time by like giving it a bunch
Yeah.
of like the ethics police
It's
is
almost
sitting
like it's
in and
almost
like
like
watching your
parenting a
responses.
child, right? In a way, like you know, I've had some weird situations where my kids, as a joke, would make my daughter yell a racist slur, and it
Oh
was like a
no.
terrible joke, right in the middle of some square in Europe, and I'm like, oh, we can't say that like out loud, and um, they thought it was funny because my daughter's 7 and she doesn't know any better. I think she was 6 at the
Mhm.
time, and you're like, ooh, that's racist. You can't say that. You can't, and and so we're kind of almost doing the same thing with our AIs, right? We're kind of saying, hey, our ideals don't match your outputs, and
Mhm.
don't do like we're slapping the AI on the hand, so to speak, and kind of giving it the reinforcement, uh, you know, learning like a parent
Yeah,
would.
no, it's parenting. It's
It's
parenting.
parenting in the AI.
It's
Yeah.
exactly that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's one,
But I
right?
wonder if
And
like you
then
can completely remove the bias in the AI, right? Because if it's trained on humanity, humans are racist, right?
mhm,
Like, I mean, we are prejudiced, right? And not all of us, ideally, some of us aren't, and some of us are extremely, right? But there's like that
mhm.
bell curve to everything, right, in society. And so I think if you kind of step back and you go, okay, we don't want racist AI, or, right, or biased AI, right? How do
Uh-huh.
you like? I think ideally, I think people would step back and objectively agree to that. Yeah, I think that's a good ideal, moralistically, right?
It is. But the thing is, everyone has different definitions of bias,
Right,
which is what's so hard to contend with. And at the end of the day, right, every human has different definitions of
right.
bias. So you just end up with the bias of the teacher AI that's training the student AI. The student AI learns the same biases of the teacher AI, and then you're now just back to square one. So ideally, you have multiple teacher models, like helping this one student model, which is similar to the experience that people go through, right? You don't just have
Yeah,
one person telling you what's right and wrong. You have society as a whole. Um, so yeah, there's a
right.
lot of
Because there's
potential
always like
there.
extremists out there, right? And
Hmm.
are there this possibility that somebody can take something like Llama 2, the open source Facebook meta model, and train it to do racist rants and do
Hmm.
bad things, right?
Oh,
Or did they
easily.
build?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The thing is, like, it's so easy to make AI behave in a biased fashion,
yeah,
just because machine learning in general is inherently like disposed towards finding like local minima to solutions, right? And like I'll tie that back to this in a second. But what that means is it's just trying to optimize its way towards like minimizing some mathematical equation. And
yeah,
it will find
yeah.
solutions to
Like
this
like
mathematical
gradient descent,
equation.
right? You're just kind of trying to
Yeah,
find
yeah.
where the second derivative is, going to zero or whatever, or going to one.
And if you give it the access to the internet, right? And say, I want you to learn how the English language works and put
Hmm.
together like sentences like,
Right.
that are comprehensible in the English language, it's just going to turn out super racist and biased because that's what like the majority of the content that it has access to are going to look like.
Or it has access
Um,
to some of it, right? And
mhm,
or I mean, it has access to all of it, but not all of it is biased and racist, right? And so,
mhm,
I feel like anthropomorphizing a little bit, but AI is like a child of humanity, right? It's an invention, and I wonder if it will be better than its parents, you know?
mm. I
And
think
I think,
humans have the
yeah,
tendency to be better than their parents
yeah.
at certain things, but I think that that typically doesn't happen with AI because it doesn't like the value function for a human is changing all the time. It's
Well, you can
not
imagine
some
there's a
math
couple hundred
equation.
IQ
Yeah.
parents, right? Average IQ is 100, and they
Uh-huh.
give birth to like a 200 IQ child. That
Hmm.
200 IQ child's not gonna be like his parents or her
Yeah,
parents, right?
exactly.
And that's kind of what's happening right now is we're giving birth to this like super intelligent thing or series of things. We'll probably all have like our own personal AIs running on our hardware and stuff, or in our phones or whatever, or in the cloud somewhere. And you think about it, it will probably make us a better society,
Hmm. I
right? Because now
think
we have
that
this
there
super intelligent child that's
I
way
think the
smarter than
analogy
us. Yeah,
breaks down just a little bit, and here's why, right? It's like
yeah,
the way that AI currently at least learns, right? Most of these AGI things is that they're still like optimizing something. So if you want to optimize to be ethical and to be unbiased, you need to specify that somehow.
yeah.
So it's
Well, I
the
wonder
creator
though,
of the
like, I
system.
wonder if you build self-referential, recurring feedback learning loops into
Mm,
AI,
Yeah.
and it can kind of reason through its actions. Like you said earlier, I think AI is, has some sort of reasoning abilities, right? Talk us through that. Like, you know more about this stuff than I do. You know, would a super intelligent 99 percentile IQ and AI be able to reason automatically? Like, maybe it's not good moralistically to, is moralistically even a word? Maybe it's not good for me to behave that way.
Like,
Yeah, we
like
were
can
talking.
can AI
Yeah,
be more ethical than its creators?
can AI be more ethical and have better morals than us? Can it
Oh, and
reason
like the
through
reasoning
things?
capabilities, right?
Yeah, because it has such deep. Imagine having the intellectual firepower of like Socrates or Plato or something, or Aristotle, but times 10, and it can reason through all the moral judgments um, in a super intelligent way. Like one of the things I think about is, you know, help the audience me and the audience understand this. You know, the way these large language models work is it's like 1,000-dimensional space, right? So it kind
Hmm.
of considers the word love, and then it kind of considers all the ways that love can interrelate to every other word in the language, and then how it relates. So the next round, so you could have like 1,000 different definitions of love. It probably
Hmm.
knows definitions of love that we don't know, or maybe it's very
Yeah.
esoteric.
So, like, let me try to give a little bit of insight into this. But large language models essentially don't reason. In fact, capital R reasoning is what Sam Altman calls it. But like reasoning that doesn't just appear like reasoning, but is like actual multi-stage thinking, as far as I know, has not been achieved by any AI system. And that's where like the whole analogy between like humans and AI, at least currently, breaks down.
Yeah.
Um, is because AI appears to reason, but it's not actually.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is similar to that like embedding space thing that you were mentioning, right? Is let's say that I have like you know 1,000 words, right? And I need like like let's say about Socrates' teachings, and I need to come up with the next teaching in this space, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I have access to all the information in the world that I want, and I have this prompt.
Yeah.
Um, what AI is doing is just taking this prompt up and throwing it into this like hundreds of thousands of dimensional space,
Yeah.
and like what that means is like really hard to explain outside of ML terms. But let's see if I can come up with a good analogy.
It's
It's
almost like
kind of
the hundreds of thousands of weightings of all the possibilities of the combinations, right?
exactly,
And
but the
it's
thing
sort of
is,
coming up
all
based on the reinforcement training that it occurred back in the lab. It's basically saying, "Oh, okay, you want Plato to comment on Eminem's rap songs," and so it kind of just mashes all that into a multidimensional space. Now you have Plato analyzing Eminem,
yeah,
something ridiculous like
seriously,
that.
like the multidimensional space is like carefully constructed. Like the architecture of what that space is supposed to look like is carefully constructed by human engineers, right?
Yeah,
But what that what each item in the space actually ends up looking like is determined by the numbers that the model learns over time.
right.
So that's a little bit about how like embeddings work, but it takes that embedding and then it uses it in like a fixed length process, right? So it's not reasoning because reasoning can take like arbitrary number of steps. It's using like a fixed length process to then take that and then spit out the next thing. So, for example, if solving a problem takes more than the number of fixed length steps that exist in a large language model, it will never be able to answer the question. Like even from like an information theory perspective, no matter how much like how many parameters you use, like how well you like train this model, it'll never be able to answer the question. Um,
Mm,
and that's like a fundamental problem that AI has that humans don't. Because humans can just continue to think when they like humans know when they haven't solved it, they can continue to think. But
right.
AI doesn't know when it hasn't solved something because it's just following like a fixed like
That's the
path.
hallucination problem, right? Because it doesn't have
Yeah.
this like self-referential consciousness loop that we have, where we're kind of like, is that right? Does that sound right? Does that make sense? It's like the common sense. It's like, oh yeah, that company exited for $1 billion, and you look it up. It's like, no, it didn't. Well,
Exactly.
that's
And so
that's
AI
kind of
just
what you
makes
want to
stuff up.
hear, though, right? That's the weighted
Yeah.
multidimensional space of what you want to hear. Um, what I find super interesting in all this is, humans can't think in that 100,000 dimensional space, right?
Hmm.
That's what's really interesting. It's almost like a new kind of intelligence that we've invented that thinks in a different way than us, you know, or at
Yeah.
least or at
No, I
least
mean,
or at least generates things like we generate music or language or text, and it does that in a different way than us, which is really interesting.
I think that it's a very interesting philosophical argument
Yeah,
because the brain also works in terms of these like gigantic state spaces. Because in
yeah,
reality, neurons are just ones and zeros, right? But our consciousness allows us to explain steps of the process
right.
versus like,
Yeah, calculate a little bit, analyze, assess. Calculate a
mhm,
little bit, analyze, assess. Yeah, there's like steps to it,
yeah, versus like AI is like literally here is the answer.
right?
It's a complete black box. There's no transparency, especially with autoregressive LLMs, like the current
Yeah,
fundamental technology behind like GPT, right? There's no explanation. If you ask ChatGPT to explain itself, it is not in fact explaining itself. It is looking at the input and the output and then hallucinating another reason as to why it thought the way that it did.
yeah. So
It's not
fascinating.
actually looking
Yeah.
into like what it was thinking about. So that's a weird fact. But
Well, let's switch to the rapid fire round.
oh, sure.
What's the most impactful book that you've ever read?
There is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He was a hostage negotiator working for the FBI.
Yeah.
Like for someone who,
What an interesting
I
book.
wasn't.
I read it a long time ago.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, like he's a great storyteller. First off, like excellent storytelling throughout the book. But there are so many like human psyche related like quirks in there that are just
Yeah.
like really cool to hear about. Like I would recommend, especially anyone who is getting into sales or anyone who is getting into any like person facing role. It's a must read.
Yeah, that's a really good book. If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Three of my customers, right?
Spoken like a true founder.
uh,
Yeah.
right. In reality, my answer to this changes every day. Um, like currently, if you ask me like a few weeks ago, like I was very fortunate to be able to like ask questions to both like Jan LeCun and Sam Altman
Yeah.
at the same time. I kind of just want to like listen in on a conversation between them. Like I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Ask ChatGPT to make a conversation between them.
honestly, with the amount of media that they both have out there
Right.
about
Yeah.
their like press present, it might
And
even just
all
be
the
it, right?
papers and all the stuff they've written. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have a good answer to that one? Who are the three people that you would like
Oh,
to hear from?
you flipped you've now taken the Ignite mirror and shined it back at me. You put me on the spot. So Ray Kurzweil, big fan of
Okay.
his. Singularity is near one of the more impactful books I've ever read. Um, ooh, probably like the Buddha, like Siddhartha
Hmm.
Gautama, like literally the Buddha. I think that would be really amazing. Um, we'd have to get a translator probably, I guess, but oh, Carl Sagan maybe from a science perspective. Just
Yeah.
amazing. Uh, book, the Contact, the movie, the Cosmos, the show. I mean, just a really amazing gem of a human being.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's nice. Maybe you'll get them all on the podcast one day, just
Yeah.
simulated through AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, what's a hidden talent that you have that nobody knows about?
Oh, okay. So I do sing,
Oh wow.
but before you ask, I've got a rule about not singing on podcasts. So,
Yeah. No, that's
yeah.
awesome.
But yeah, I've done a cappella for a long time.
Oh wow.
It's like yeah, something that I really enjoy.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. Okay, maybe on the next podcast. Um, Speaking of podcasts, what's a podcast that you think everyone should listen to?
Oh, definitely. Like the podcast that I've spent the most time listening to easily is Freakonomics.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was this like one episode about like the economics of marriage that they put out that was like so like
Wow.
left field, but like it made so much sense at the same time. Yeah, definitely would go check it out.
That's amazing. I was just watching a talk from the All In podcast, the summit they had, and somebody was giving a talk on the decline of marriage rates and why that um, it's a luxury idea, is how he phrased
Mm,
it. He's a sociologist, and it's a really interesting podcast because he's basically saying that it's a luxury idea because it won't impact you as much as poor people. Like if you're a rich person and you're not married or you have children out of wedlock, not a big deal for you. But
hmm
if you're poor, it's a huge deal. So it's more of a
Yeah,
class. It's a class thing. It's a luxury idea. I found it. I found the talk really, really interesting. And I listen to Freakonomics all the time. It's great.
mm.
What's the best advice you ever received?
Ooh, okay. So one of the things that my dad's been through some tough times, right? And he's always told me that like maintaining a routine, staying disciplined, right, is how you like get through those times, right?
Yeah,
And it's how you alleviate your stress. It's how you like assure yourself of you know of the of your ability to handle things. And I seriously cannot second that more. If like you're feeling like now is a downtime in life, that just means it's time to get into routine and get yourself back into step. So,
yeah, that's interesting. I just got back from a long trip in Europe, and the routine became going from city to city on trains, planes, and automobiles, and
mm,
it felt like I was just so happy to get home, right, and get back into my routine. Just
exactly.
have my little exercise machine and go for my little walk that I do. And yeah, you got to
It's the
get,
little things.
yeah,
It's not even like, it's like making sure you drink like a whole cup of water in the morning when you wake up, or like folding your sheets. Like, those are the things that like seem to have the biggest impact.
yeah.
I really don't understand how it works. I don't know. Maybe you feel the same way, but
No, you got to have that routine, right?
yeah.
Which is weird with all this technological unemployment coming.
hmm
There'll be a big, so many people define themselves by what they do for work. And when your job gets automated, uh, you're gonna have to find a new routine, right? And
Yeah.
it's a dangerous, right, kind of purgatory situation where you haven't quite grounded yourself in your new thing, whatever that new thing is. So some people
hmm
can succumb to addiction problems and depression and things like that. So that would be very interesting to watch in the next 5 to 10 years. Um,
Agreed.
what's your current obsession? TV, hobby?
So this is really funny. My co-founder and I were living together over the summer when we were in Y Combinator, right? And like multiple times, we would like dream about emails. Like I would dream about the algorithm that we're making. Like we're like living and breathing the startup, right? Like
It's
we're working
hilarious.
like 20 hours a day sometimes. So I would like legitimately dream about like emails and customer feedback, and I was like, outside of work, you can find me in the rock climbing
Oh,
gym. I
nice.
think that's like a late obsession of mine. It's like a lot of
Yeah.
puzzle solving. Really, it's like,
Yeah,
of course, like
my
there's
son
like,
loves to climb. Yeah, that's exactly
oh,
how he
that's
describes it.
awesome,
It's like you're trying to solve this puzzle of getting across the wall, right?
and it's really like mentally refreshing. I would say, like you're really putting in like your whole mental effort into doing
Yeah,
something, and
you
it just
have to
like
be in
takes
the
your mind
flow
off it.
state, otherwise you fall off the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And you get some adrenaline too, like out of it. I think it's great.
You probably
So,
watched Valley Uprising, the Yosemite climbing. There's a couple on Netflix. Valley
ooh,
Uprising. It's on Netflix. Really good movie about the free climbers. And then there's like Solo or Free Solo
the free solo, Alex
about the
Honnold,
guys
yeah,
that
terrifying.
climb El Cap in 4 hours, 5 hours. It's really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Um,
like it's cool but terrifying. Yeah.
and so, last question: if you weren't doing Hyperbound, what would you be doing?
So there's two ways I'd answer this, right? Like one is me in my current state, but like one if I just had all the money in the world and I was just, doing something. So in my current state, right, I just need to be solving a hard problem to keep myself entertained.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I just don't do my best work if I'm solving something that is like menial. It kind of like harkens
Yeah.
back to me sending out those personalized emails. Like I get so much more
Yeah. Too
tired
menial.
doing easy
Too menial.
tasks.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, seriously, like even though I'm working a lot now,
Hmm.
I still wake up every day feeling refreshed and happy about it.
Yeah.
Because it's something I like legitimately care about. So if I wasn't working on Hyperbound, I think I'd be doing it at a startup, right? Because like finding out what customers want and addressing it is kind of addicting. To make
Yeah.
something people want. But if I had like
I
all the
love
money in
that.
the world, if I had all the money in the world, right, and I was just solving something, it would go into studying like observability and explainability
Mm,
of like artificial intelligence models and seeing
yeah.
like how either internally or externally can we police like AI and enforce some ethical standards. So I think that's where I would like to be if I was essentially retired. So
Well, this was such an amazing conversation. Tell the audience how to get in touch with Hyperbound if they're interested in piloting your software.
yeah, absolutely. So you can head over to hyperbound.ai and fill out the waitlist there. And if you're really, really interested
Mm,
and you can't make yourself wait on the waitlist, reach out to founders at hyperbound.ai.
love it. Well, thank you so much, Atul. This was an amazing conversation.
Brian, likewise, I'm very happy you had me on.